Hello there, welcome back to the Genius Studios Lab. I am Derek Keels, your host, and today we're going to be going over some typography techniques using After Effects. Now, typography is basically the art of placing and arranging text, and what that means in video oftentimes is it means animating text. It's a good way to get your message across just using text, but text in a creative way. And so I'm going to be showing you some basic things on how to animate text. And so here we have our composition that's already open. And as you can see, I already have a gradient set up. If you need to know how to set up a gradient, you can see the previous tutorial. I believe the previous tutorial will show you how to set up a gradient like this. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First thing we need some text. So I'm gonna grab the text tool here and just click and then type in what I need to type in. Genius. Okay, that's good. Layer, new text. I'm gonna put all of the text on different layers. Genius Studios, and we're gonna just come up here, layer, new text, Genius Studios Lab. I'm going to move that down just a little bit so I can see it. And then we're going to go layer new text once again, and begins is what I want to type in. And I'm just going to move it just so I can see it once again. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a drop shadow to all of this text here. So I'm going to go into my effects and presets window and find drop shadow by simply typing in drop in the search window. And then I'm just going to click and drop the drop shadow in on all of the text. So it just brings it up from the substrate a little bit. So looks a little better. So with that done now, we're going to go ahead and begin our animation. So I'm going to move everything off of the frame because I want everything to animate into the frame and then animate out. And so you might want to adjust the size of your frame so that you can see outside of your frame. You know, if your frame is like this, if your composition is like this, you can't see outside of the composition. So you want to go ahead and adjust it down so that you can see what's happening outside. Now that can be done by simply scrolling with your wheel on your mouse, or you can come over here and adjust the size accordingly as well. So anyway, that's that. I'm just going to move Genius up here like so. I'm going to move Studios over here. I'm going to move Lab over here. I'm going to move Begins up here, and that's kind of how I want everything to start out. I want everything to start out off of the frame, so all we begin with is the gradients, and then we're going to animate everything in. So I'm going to come over here and click the Genius layer, and I'm going to hit P to bring up my position, and I'm going to hit the stopwatch. I'm going to bring my current time indicator to 9 frames, and then I'm going to bring it down, the Genius down on the Y so that it animates in at that point. I'm going to go up to Studios. I'm going to hit P, and I am going to hit the stopwatch to toggle the animation. I'm going to go down to 15 frames, and then I'm going to bring the Studios in along the X. Perfect. I'm going to go to 24 frame. We'll go all the way to 1 second, shall we? Go all the way to 1 second and add another keyframe so that it stays in that position. And then I'm going to move it to 1 second and 8 frames. And then I'm going to animate it off on the X. So basically what that is going to do, if we RAM preview it, is you see the Studios comes in and stays for a second, stays and then moves, comes in, stays and then moves. And so that was done using those keyframes in that manner. And so next thing we're going to do is animate the lab now. And so I want the lab to start coming in when the Studios starts moving off. So I'm going to click on lab here, and then I'm going to hit P to bring up the position. I'm going to hit the stopwatch, and I have it pretty much lined up with the Studios position when the Studios starts to move. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to 8 frames, 1 second and 8 frames, and then move the lab in along the X like so. So now essentially what we have is we have the studios, the Genius comes in, the studios comes in, and then the lab comes in as the studios is moving off. And so if somebody were reading it, they would read, obviously, they would read Genius Studios Lab, Genius Studios Lab, Genius Studios Lab. So everything is animated in a nice fancy way, but it's animated so that, you know, the reader can read what you are actually saying in the order that you are saying it. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to animate the Genius in Lab off of the screen. So I'm going to move to 1 second and 15 frames. And I'm just going to add another keyframe here in the same position for the lab. And I'm going to add another keyframe here for the Genius in the same position as well, so that they will stay in this position. And then at 1 second and 24 frames, I'm going to move Genius off, and I'm going to move Lab off. So essentially this is what we have now, and then they move off. Perfect. Now the last thing we're going to do is right here, as Genius and Lab begins to move off, I'm going to go to Begins, going to hit P to bring up the position. I'm going to start the stopwatch to start the animation, and as soon as they clear the screen, I'm going to bring the Begins in down on the Y axis. Okay, so now essentially this is what we have. Genius Studios Lab Begins. And if you actually take a look at it a little bit bigger here, fit up to 100%, this is what we have. So it's a very, very basic typography technique, but it's an interesting way for, you know, clients, customers, people, you know, viewers, whoever's viewing your material, to look at text versus text just showing up and staying in one place, but you can actually read it. It says Genius Studios Lab Begins, and it keeps the mind kind of engaged in what's happening. So that's a very, very basic tutorial on how to do typography. And if you've liked this tutorial, go ahead and click that like button below this video, and subscribe if you can. And if you are enjoying what we're doing here on the Genius Studios Lab, it would really help us out. So, and we want to hear from you. So go ahead and leave your comments and questions and whatnot, and we will be sure to get back to you. Anyway, with that said, that is it for me. I will see you on the next tutorial.